tracks that you can go on. There's like the micro, which is the therapeutic skills and learning all that. And then there's the social administration route. So the first year is the same for everybody. So my practicum, my first year was working at a youth home. So I was working with boys ages like 8 to 12 or something like that. And I did that for a year and decided I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah, God, that will rob your soul, man.
Because they just...
Working with teenage boys?
I was basically just thrown into it. I know nothing, so I had very little confidence in what I was doing.
That's hard for a veteran.
Yeah, so then my second year, when it comes time to choose which track you want to go on, I picked the social administrative track.
Right, because you're thinking, gosh, these guys were destroying me.
So
program.
My second year in the program, I was working for a substance abuse treatment center. I was working with the executive director.
Okay.
We did a lot of fundraising.
So that's how you discovered addiction science.
Right.
Was through the graduate program.
Right.
Oh.
So we were doing a lot of fundraising. We were going to the state capitol. We were doing a lot of lobbying, meeting with politicians, trying to get laws passed around, addictions treatment and trying to get funding and stuff like that.
Huh.
And I had no interest in working in addictions. I had no interest whatsoever. I wanted nothing to do with it.
Okay.
But that was an administrative internship, so I wasn't actually working technically in that field. So then I graduated. I went out to try to find a job and couldn't find anything.
That'll do it.
And so I was going to give it another 6 months, and then I was going to start applying to law school. And thankfully found something. I ended up calling my old supervisor and was like, "Do you have anything available?" He's like, "Yeah, I got a tech position open in the recovery house." So I was like, "Okay, I'll do that."
And that's how you started in addictions.
Been in it since and love it.
Wow.
Yep.
And so that's whenever, and you actually did like it once you got into it.
Absolutely.
Working with the people.
I don't want to do anything else.
That's awesome. I had a very different route. At 16 years old in high school, I thought maybe I would like to be a psychologist. Maybe I wanted to do that. But I didn't know, there's no little brochure that tells you, hey, so you want to be a therapist, here's how you do it. So I thought, you have to go to get a doctorate and all this other stuff. And I thought, man, that is a lot of work. And so I remember being 16 years old and writing a letter to a psychologist that I looked up in the area and asked if he would be my mentor and if he would teach me how to do this and guide me. And I went to his office and he wasn't there, and I slipped it underneath the door. And this was way before email and things. And I slipped it underneath the door and I waited for him to call me back. He never did. And so it crushed my dream. So I ended up going into a bachelor's of religion. At the time, I was going to be a minister. And so I did a bachelor's degree in religion, and that had a lot to do with psychology. A lot of the training in a religious program is how do you sit with people, how do you visit with people, how do you meet them as a human being, and go through their life. And so there was a lot of counseling coursework, and I thought, man, I really like that. That part's really fun. So then I graduated with that. I became a school teacher and actually taught at a high school for a while, 7.5 years. And one day with my high school students, I had them running through this program online, which does it's like questions, and it asks you about your personality.
Like an aptitude test.
Yes. And so it was like a personality career test. Okay. And it tells you kind of what you'd be good at. And one of the students said, hey, have you ever taken this? You should take it. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess I will just for fun, right? But I'm a teacher. That's my career. So I jump in there, I take the test, and it says, you should be a therapist. I got high marks in that. And I was like, yeah, I wanted to be a therapist, but, that guy never wrote me back, and now I have a degree in something else, and I'm not going to go get a doctorate. But in the little computer program, it said, well, click here to learn how. And I clicked it, and it said, you can go get a master's degree, and you could be a therapist in 2 or 3 years. And I was like, what? I didn't know that. So right that day, I called a therapist in the community, and I asked if he would have coffee with me. His name is Chris Caldwell. I love you, Chris. He's still out here in Las Vegas. He owns LifeSpring Counseling. I met with Chris, had coffee with him, and just said, can I ask you about your life? Can I ask you about your career? And he was like, yeah, go ahead. And I interviewed him for an hour, and at the end of that hour, I was sold. I was like, I want to be him. He is the coolest guy. I love his life. I love his career. I enrolled in my master's immediately, did that, and the rest is history. And then as soon as I graduated with my master's, I left teaching. I got into behavioral health, decided to focus on addictions and mental health, because it seemed like it was everywhere to me. I looked around, addiction had touched my family. It was touching so many families, and I was like, I definitely want to make sure I can treat it. And now I'm in it full time. So it's that's my story, I guess. So interesting little winding tale.
It's a much better story than mine.
Your story's good.
Well, mine was pretty much do this or learn how to weld. because that's
No, Nick, you got to think about storytelling, buddy. Your story was a choice between healing people for a living as a therapist or destroying them as a lawyer, and you made the call. And to all of our law listeners, I apologize for nothing. You know what you do. You know. Yeah, so be a therapist, guys. If you're out there, that's a great question.
Yeah, thanks for writing in. That was a great question.
Really good question.
Yeah, if there's anything that my co-host loves to talk about, it's himself.
I love it.
Thank you for opening up the dialogue.
Diagnose me, Nick. Let's play a game. It's very easy. Narcissistic personality disorder. Ding, ding. You win. That's all the time we've got for this week's session. Thank you to those who contributed to our show today. We really appreciate it. Remember, pod therapy isn't something you should keep all to yourself. Help us reach others by sharing this episode. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/podtherapy or on Twitter @podtherapyguys.
Do you want to add your own advice to today's questions? Post your thoughts at podtherapy.net and join the conversation. I'm Nick Tangeman.
I am the great Jim Jobin.
Thanks, and we'll see you for appointment next week. Happy birthday, Ben.